An apple, a raven, and a writing desk. The story of Ever After High. Chapter 4. True Heart's Day. There, deep within the enchanted forest, Ashlynn and Hunter sat in shock looking up at Duchess, who was smiling deviously at them. Poor, perfect Ashlynn. Now everyone will know who you really are, she said, practically screaming at the couple. Please, Duchess, you can't tell anyone that Hunter and I are secretly dating, Ashlynn pleaded. Well, that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Ash, this will knock you down the royal ranks, but don't worry, I'll take your place, Duchess said with a smile. Tears started to form in Ashlynn's eyes, and Hunter, noticing this, stepped up to Duchess, getting close to her face. Leave, he said calmly in a low voice, before turning back to Ashlynn and embracing her. Duchess, who had gotten what she had came for, didn't see a reason for staying and danced off into the forest towards Ever After. As the sun was setting, Ashlynn pulled away from Hunter in tears. She's going to tell everyone, the princess said softly. It's going to be okay, assured Hunter. How? You saw what happened today. Duchess is right. They'll hate me, she cried. What is the royal ranks? Hunter asked. It's a list of all the kingdoms and royals ranked on different things like riches and popularity, Ashlynn said, sniffing. Duchess and the kingdom of Kathy aren't remarkably high on the list. And knocking you down will make her higher? Asked Hunter. I don't know, she said, burying her head into Hunter's chest. It'll be okay, we'll figure something out, he assured her. It was dark by the time Ashlynn got back to her dorm, and Briar was still out with Cupid, so Hunter went with her, not wanting to leave her alone. She quickly unlocked the door, and they both ducked inside. There you are. I was worried. You never showed up for dinner, said Darling, hugging her sister in relief. Darling, Ashlynn said in surprise. What is he doing here? Darling asked, looking at Hunter, who seemed to be frozen. Ashlynn could feel her heart beating out of her chest, and all the lies she thought to say got caught in her throat. Ashlynn, Darling said. Completely exhausted from everything that had taken place in the last 12 hours, Ashlynn fell into her sister's arms and started to cry. We're dating, she said through her tears. Darling let go of her sister, and they both sat down on her bed, while Hunter stood awkwardly in the doorway. What do you mean, Ash? Asked Darling. We met a year ago in the Fourth Kingdom at Briar's birthday party, Ashlynn said, wiping away her tears. My father catered, said Hunter, stepping forward to comfort Ashlynn. A year? Said Darling in shock. I'm so sorry I didn't tell you. I was afraid of what everyone would think, and we didn't want to hear people's opinions because... Ashlynn froze and looked up at Hunter. I love him, Darling. Darling looked at her sister and said nothing. I'm so sorry, Ashlynn said, before starting to cry again and put her head in her hands. Darling, please listen, Hunter started to say, but Darling put her hand up to quiet him. Darling put her hand on Ashlynn's knee, and the sisters looked at each other with tears in both their eyes. Then, without saying a word, the two sisters shared a tight and loving embrace. Hunter turned away, holding his hand over his eyes. I'm so sorry, Ashlynn, Darling said after a few moments. Ashlynn let go and looked at her sister. For what? She asked. For making you feel like you had to hide this from me, said Darling. You're my sister. If he makes you happy, then I'm happy for you, royal or otherwise. He does, Ashlynn said, looking back at Hunter. Are you crying? She asked. It's so sweet, Hunter said, sniffing. Aw, I like him, laughed Darling. Hunter Huntsman, he said proudly, bowing to the princess. Darling, and you don't have to bow, she said. It's nice to finally meet one of Ashlynn's siblings, Hunter said excitedly, sitting down on the bed. Well, you'll probably meet the guys after tomorrow, said Ashlynn, looking down. What's tomorrow? Asked Darling. Duchess has proof and is going to spell it out for the whole school, Ashlynn said. We don't know what to do, Hunter added. I understand why you didn't tell anyone, but it might sound better coming from the two of you. It's always better to tell the truth, Darling said. Mom would say that. Ashlynn laughed before looking intently at a picture of her family on her desk. She sounds smart, said Hunter. She is, agreed Darling. You're right, said Ashlynn, looking at Hunter. Tomorrow we'll tell everyone the truth. Ashlynn hugged her sister. Thank you, she whispered. The rest of the evening, Hunter and Darling got to know each other, which was something Ashlynn never thought would happen. Darling really liked Hunter. He was nice and thoughtful, kind of like Ashlynn. She saw a connection between them, the type of connection their parents had, as if they were two puzzle pieces that formed a beautiful, peaceful picture and fit together so well you couldn't see the line that separated them. Darling and Hunter both left Ashlynn's room, so Briar wouldn't see either of them when she returned. She left feeling closer to her sister and relieved that the weird energy between them was gone. They can't be mad, she thought. Everyone loves Ashlynn, they'll understand. By the time Darling made her way back to her room, it was late, and every student was tucked away in their dorm, with each one wondering what madness tomorrow would bring. The next morning, Briar and Ashlynn were getting ready at their vanities, talking about the True Hearts Day party, and what they were going to wear. "Tell me why you can't come to breakfast again," Ashlynn said. "Cupid and I ordered decorations, and Grim can't see them," explained Briar. "So where is the party anyway?" Ashlynn asked. Briar looked down nervously, then continued to fix her makeup as if she hadn't heard the question. "Briar," yelled Ashlynn, "where is it?" "The Glass Palace," said Briar sheepishly. "Briar," Ashlynn yelled again. "I know, I'm sorry, but it's the only place close enough to campus, so Grim won't know we're gone," Briar explained. "Please?" "Okay, you can use our summer palace, but make sure you get it cleaned," Ashlynn said. "Of course," Briar said, excited. Briar picked up her small purse and enchanted history textbook, then turned back to Ashlynn. "Ready?" she asked. "Oh, I need to finish something. I'll meet up with you later," Ashlynn replied, looking away from Briar. "Okay, but let's meet up at lunch. I feel like I've hardly seen you," Briar said sorrowfully. "Sure," Ashlynn agreed, forcing a smile. Briar turned to head for the door, not fully convinced by Ashlynn's promise. "Briar?" Ashlynn yelled. "Yeah," she said, turning back around. "Nothing," Ashlynn muttered. "You just mean a lot to me." Briar put her bag on the ground before walking over to Ashlynn and giving her a hug. "You mean a lot to me, too," she said, squeezing Ashlynn harder. "Best friends forever after." After a few moments, the princesses let go of each other, and Briar picked up her bag before leaving the room and heading to meet Cupid. Ashlynn sat quietly at her vanity, once again drowning in her thoughts, when Apple walked into the room so abruptly it made Ashlynn jump. "True Hearts Day," she yelled. "Apple, good morning," said Ashlynn. "It used to be such an important holiday on the royal calendar, but no one has celebrated it in such a long time," continued Apple. "With Briar and Cupid planning it, it's sure to be great," agreed Ashlynn. "Could you imagine finding our princess?" Apple sighed lovingly. "Yeah," sighed Ashlynn. "Sweetie, what's wrong?" Apple said, trying to comfort her friend. "I'm not sure you'd understand," Ashlynn said, turning away from Apple. "Is it boy trouble?" Apple said with a wink. "Oh, wow, it's getting late. We should get going," said Ashlynn, standing up while getting her things together for class. "Okay," laughed Apple, following Ashlynn out of the room. "I need to meet Darling before class," Ashlynn said, closing the door behind them. "Okay, we can all meet for lunch," replied Apple. "Sure," agreed Ashlynn. The princesses hugged before Apple headed down the corridor that led to the school building. Ashlynn turned in the other direction and walked out of the castle-like doors of the dorm to sit on a bench outside to wait for Hunter. In the main hall of the school building, Cupid, Briar, and Prince Elijah of Maldonia were moving boxes full of party supplies when Headmaster Grim walked up behind them and cleared his throat. "Ms. Beauty," he growled. "Headmaster, good morning," Briar replied nervously. "What is all this?" Grim asked, looking at a tower of boxes Elijah was trying to carry. "Oh, this is," Briar said, trying to come up with a lie. "To decorate our dorms," interrupted Cupid. "Yeah, to make it feel more like home," Briar added. Grim stared at the girls for a moment, not fully convinced. "Put those boxes where they belong, and don't be late for class," he growled, before walking away. The three royals all sighed in relief once Grim was out of sight. "That was too close," Cupid said. "Yeah, I thought we were done," agreed Elijah. "Well, we're not, so let's just get this to the Glass Palace before first period," said Briar, picking up the last of the boxes. A little ways down the main hall, Duchess and Blondie were talking near the giant doors of the school building. Duchess, who was almost glowing with excitement, was showing Blondie a picture on her mirror phone. "Not so princess-like, hiding a relationship with a rebel," sneered Duchess. "I don't know, Duchess. This is a bomb spell, but Ash is my friend," said Blondie. "Isn't your mirror cast the most watched in Ever After?" yelled Duchess. "It is," replied Blondie, "but—" "So if you don't report on this, some other lucky reporter will," Duchess hissed. Before Blondie could give Duchess her answer, everyone in the hall gasped as Ashlynn and Hunter walked into the building holding hands. "No, they can't own it. How am I supposed to get my happily ever after?" yelled Duchess. Ashlynn waved at Duchess as she and Hunter walked by. Hunter put his arm around her, and the two of them laughed, making their way over to Ashlynn's locker while Blondie took pictures of them. They were enjoying being together in public, which they had never done before. However, their merriment was quickly cut off by Apple, who grabbed Ashlynn's arm, pulling her away from Hunter. "What are you doing?" Apple said in a low voice. "Apple," Ashlynn said, surprised. "We've been dating," she continued, smiling hopefully at her best friend. "But you're a royal, and he's not," Apple yelled. "Apple," Ashlynn said sadly, reaching for her hand. "No," yelled Apple, pulling away. Ashlynn looked at her friend in shock, trying desperately not to cry. "Apple," she whispered. "Come on," Hunter whispered, leading Ashlynn away from the main hall. After a few moments of silence, each student made their way to their first period, leaving Apple frozen in shock, alone in the hallway. Once again, it was a mostly quiet school day. The first 3 class periods went by quickly, although for Ashlynn it was painfully long. None of the students she considered her friends would talk to her, even give her a second glance, and the rest of the school simply stared at her as if she were foreign. Duchess, on the other hand, was enjoying every minute, which Ashlynn had noticed. "Maybe I made a mistake, putting Hunter before my friends," she thought as she doodled drawings inside a golden notebook. Raven, Maddie, and Kitty had music theory together 4th period, taught by Pied Piper. Maddie spent most of the class arguing about what cotton candy would sound like if it were a song with the dormouse that lived in her hat, while Raven taught Kitty how to read music. By the end of the class, Mr. Piper had finished his lesson early and the students were getting ready to go to lunch, while Maddie was still arguing with the dormouse. "Mr. Piper, can you show us that note one more time?" Kitty asked. "Of course, my dear," Mr. Piper said proudly. "Kitty, you know what happens," said Raven. Pied Piper picked up his silver pipe and played a small note when dozens of mice fell from nowhere all around him. "Rats, I forgot," Kitty said, smiling deviously before disappearing. A bell rang throughout the school, dismissing the students from lunch. Raven pulled Maddie out of her conversation with the dormouse, and the two of them made their way to the cafeteria. "Can you feel it, Raven?" asked Maddie. "No, what?" replied Raven. "Love," said Maddie, throwing her arms in the air. "I thought you were going to say tension. Hunter and Ashlynn sure dropped a bomb spell this morning," said Raven. "Unfair to wear what people want," Maddie said, crossing her arms and frowning. "Okay, I give up. What does that mean?" Raven asked. "You couldn't feel it?" Maddie replied in disbelief. "What?" yelled Raven. "She's so tense. They all are. She doesn't raise her voice, or get messy, or wear comfy clothes, or say how she feels. She couldn't even tell her friends that she's in love," yelled Maddie. Raven looked away, deep in thought, then turned back to Maddie. "Once again, you're smarter than us all." Maddie chuckled at her friend as they reached the lunch table Cerise and the rest of the rebels were sitting at. Raven went to sit in an open space next to Hunter when he moved his backpack, preventing her from sitting down. "Sorry, I'm saving this spot for Ashlynn," Hunter explained. "No worries," replied Raven, sitting down next to Maddie. "We're all really happy for you, Hunt," Sparrow said while strumming his guitar. As the group of rebels were congratulating Hunter, Ashlynn walked into the cafeteria with her head down. "Ashlynn," Hunter yelled, gesturing her to the seat next to him with a big smile. Ashlynn walked over, and Hunter placed a flower crown made of pink lilies on her head. "We need to talk," she said sorrowfully, looking down at the floor as she led him away from the table. The table full of rebels, along with Poppy, Holly, and Briar, who had just walked in, watched as the couple made their way to the balcony overlooking the gardens. "Ashlynn," Hunter said, reaching for her hand. She pulled away, still looking at the ground. "I thought telling the truth would make it easier, take the pressure off. But now my best friend won't talk to me, and I'm in line for a throne," said Ashlynn, with perfect tears rolling down her cheeks. "But Ashlynn," Hunter said, reaching out for her again. This time, taking off the flower crown, she handed it back to him before pushing him away. "I think we should—" She paused and swallowed hard. "Break up," she stuttered. Ashlynn ran away crying, while Hunter stood on the balcony, clutching the string of flowers and staring longingly into the gardens. Unannounced to both of them, Holly and Briar had listened in on their conversation and were both frozen in shock of how upset Ashlynn was and how heartbroken Hunter looked. It had been hours later, and the heartbroken look on their best friend's face was still on Holly and Briar's minds. The two princesses were waiting in Briar's dorm after class for Ashlynn to return, but she never did. They asked Darling and the rest of her siblings, but none of them had heard from her. After asking a few other students, it became quite clear that no one had heard from Ashlynn in hours. Now in a panic to find their friend, the royals looked in the school building, cafeteria, garden, and library, but still, the princess was nowhere to be found. "I'll kill him," yelled Daring, stomping into the lounge, where Holly, Briar, and Darling were still trying to contact Ashlynn. "Anything?" Dexter asked, following his brother into the room. "Straight to voicemail," replied Darling. "How do you even know she's with Hunter?" Holly asked. "Raven said he and Sparrow went hunting," Briar added. "And you believe her?" Daring scoffed. "She's covering for him." "Try Apple again," Darling said. "She locked herself in her room. She's not going to answer," said Briar. Daring turned to leave the room when he got a phone call from an unknown number. "Ashlynn," he yelled, answering the phone. "What? How did you get my number?" The person on the other end said something which seemed to anger Daring more. "What? Where is she? What have you done?" Daring continued to yell. "Who is it?" Darling asked, rushing over to her brother. The person on the other end hung up, and Daring stared puzzled at his phone. "Well, who was it?" asked Briar. "Is Ashlynn okay?" added Dexter. Daring continued to stare at his phone, puzzled. "Say something, Daring," snapped Darling. "It was that Wonderland freak," Daring said, confused, still looking at his phone. Later that night, in her dorm, Briar tossed and turned, unable to stop thinking about what Maddie might have said or where Ashlynn might be. Daring wouldn't tell anyone about the phone call. Something she said must have upset him, Briar thought, looking up at the ceiling. "Best friends forever after," she said aloud. The two princesses usually laid in their beds and talked across the room at night until one of them fell asleep first, which was more often than not Briar. Without this usually nightly banter, Briar found it difficult to fall asleep. She kept replaying her 16th birthday party last year in her head, thinking about all the times Ashlynn wasn't with her and if she might have been with Hunter. A wave of guilt fell over the princess as she remembered all the times she tried to set up Ashlynn with Prince Ben and how uncomfortable she looked. Or all the times Apple poked fun at her for never really having a boyfriend. Somehow, while drowning in her thoughts, Briar's eyelids felt heavy and she fell asleep, thinking of where her friend might be. The next morning, Holly stood outside of the Tower Hair Salon holding 2 coffees. "Good morning," Holly said cheerfully to Briar, getting out of a limo. "Is it?" replied Briar. "Be nice," Holly scolded. "Why? Apple wasn't nice to Ashlynn, or you," said Briar. "She was upset, and rightfully so," Holly argued. "That doesn't give her the right to blow up on her friends," Briar added. "A wonderful morning to you," Maddie said, bouncing down the sidewalk with Raven walking behind her. "Raven, what are you two doing here?" Briar asked. "Is Ashlynn with you?" "Apple invited us, and I haven't seen Ashlynn," replied Raven. "So where is Ashlynn?" Briar asked Maddie. "Fairies," she replied, looking off into the distance. "Excuse me," Briar said, baffled at Maddie's response. "Don't waste your time. We lived together, and it took me years to understand her," sighed Raven. "Hi, I'm," Holly started to say. "Princess Holly Fitzherbert," Maddie said in awe. "Yes," Holly said, confused. "Your family holds the key," continued Maddie. "What?" Raven asked. "Nothing," Holly replied nervously. "Let's get inside." The group walked inside, and Raven was shocked by the elegant decor in the building. "I thought this was a salon," she said. "It is," a woman behind a desk replied. "Princess Apple is waiting for you, Princess Holly," the woman continued. "Thank you," Holly said in a velvety voice. "This way," she said to Raven and Maddie. "Unfair to be forced to wear," Maddie laughed. "What?" Holly asked. "Nothing," yelled Raven, nudging Maddie. The girls walked into a large, round fitting room where Apple was talking with 2 women. "Perfect timing," she said to her friends as they walked in. "I got your regular selection and new ones for Raven and Maddie," Apple said, bursting with joy. "New selections?" repeated Raven. "For the party tonight," Briar said. The girls were quickly rushed into the fitting rooms, and they tried on different outfits until they each found one they liked. Then into the salon where Apple had set up manicures. Throughout their spa day, Raven could feel the tension between Briar and Apple. Apple had been nothing but warm and bubbly. However, Briar was being short with her friend, not being able to get past Apple's recent outbursts like Holly had. Maddie, however, was having a great time, completely ignoring the obvious tension and forming a new friendship with Holly. After their salon session, the girls had brunch on the terrace of the salon that looked over Storybrooke End. "Thanks for inviting us, Apple. It was fun," Raven said. "I meant what I said about us all getting along," replied Apple. "Guess that doesn't apply to everyone," Briar scoffed. "Briar," Holly yelled. "Is that why you've been so distant?" Apple asked. "Because of Raven?" "No, Raven's been more of a friend than you've been," Briar yelled. "What are you talking about?" Apple said, confused. "Ashlynn, she was hurting and couldn't confide in her best friends, and when she finally did, you rejected her," Briar continued, getting more and more upset. "Briar," Apple said sheepishly. "And now, no one's seen her in hours. She could be hurt somewhere, and the only person who knows something makes no sense," continued Briar, pointing at Maddie, who was admiring her rainbow-colored nails. "Okay, Briar," snapped Holly. Briar looked around at the table of her friends, who were hanging their heads in silence, except for Maddie, who was looking off towards the enchanted forest. "I'll see you all tonight," Briar whispered before quickly leaving the terrace. "Wait, I'm coming," yelled Holly, rushing after her. "Is she really missing?" Apple whispered, looking down. "Kind of," Raven said bashfully. Raven stood up and headed for the door, but stopped and turned back to Apple. "Unfair to be forced to wear," she whispered. "What?" Apple said, sniffing. "You royals, all of you, are so—" Raven paused. "Stuck living how people want you to. Don't do this, don't do that." "It's our destiny, to do what's best for our kingdoms and the enchanted world," Apple said defensively. "I know, but why does it have to include being someone you're not?" Raven said. It was silent for a long time, until Raven turned and left the terrace, leaving Apple alone once again. Outside of the salon, Holly and Briar were getting into the limo Briar had arrived in. "Easier to say what you need to when you don't know them," Maddie said from inside the limo. "How did you get in here?" Holly said in shock. "Wait, you're talking about Ashlynn, aren't you?" Briar snapped. "I like walking in the forest, especially at night. It almost feels like Underland," Maddie said, looking down with a sad smile. Briar stared at her for a moment before turning to the driver. "Drop us off at the forest gates," demanded Briar. "Why?" asked Holly. "Peace," Maddie whispered. Last year, Ashlynn went to her first Grand Royal Council meeting, and, well, it didn't go well. She was so upset with herself, she disappeared for hours, and when she came back, she mentioned a lagoon," explained Briar. "Costs nothing, but is painful to lose," Maddie said. "Friendship," answered Briar. "But she didn't lose us," Holly yelled. "She doesn't know that. We avoided her all day and weren't there for her at all," said Briar in a panic. "We have to find her." "You were with her, weren't you?" Holly asked Maddie. "With her I was," she answered. The limo made its way to the gates of the forest, and the two princesses got out, following Maddie, who immediately rushed off the path into the forest. After walking in silence for a while, Briar walked up closer to Maddie. "What did you say to Daring on the phone last night?" she asked. "The truth. I could say it because I don't know him," Maddie said, giggling to herself. "Which was?" asked Briar. "That he wasn't being a good brother. He only didn't like Hunter because he doesn't have royal blood, and all that was going to do was hurt Ashlynn," Maddie said proudly. Holly and Briar both looked at each other in shock. "So you were with Ashlynn last night?" Holly asked. "I like to walk in the forest at night," Maddie said. "Before, in the limo, you said it was easier to talk to someone you don't know," Holly continued. "So what did Ashlynn tell you?" Briar added. "She said she loves being royal and leading her kingdom, but wishes there weren't so many rules," answered Maddie. "She feels like she has to hide who she is from everyone, and feels like she can't breathe," Maddie continued. "That's not true," yelled Briar. "I don't know, Briar," Holly said sheepishly. "Do you feel the same?" Briar asked. "Not exactly, but I get it. I love my kingdom, but sometimes it feels like for everyone else to be happy, we can't," Holly said, looking down. It was quiet again for a long time, and Maddie was skipping and humming to herself when Holly had fallen over nothing, it seemed, then Briar right after her. Kitty, Maddie yelled, stomping her foot. As if she hadn't done anything wrong, Kitty appeared laying on the branch above the princesses. Yes, purred Kitty. Stop that. We're trying to mend relationships here, Maddie scolded. Well, you interrupted my catnap, scoffed Kitty. Where are you going anyway? Fee Lagoon, answered Maddie. So Ashlynn's still here? Kitty asked. You saw her? Briar interrupts. Saw. We spoke, Kitty said, sitting up. How much farther is it, Kitty? I'm a bit lost, Maddie asked, looking around. Far, answers Kitty. But I can get you there quick, Kitty said with a smile. Would you please, begged Holly. No, Kitty, you can't, scolds Maddie. What? We use them all the time, and your new pets won't get lost, I swear, assures Kitty. Before Maddie could argue, the ground beneath them opens and swallows Maddie along with the princesses. Screaming, Holly and Briar slide through twists and turns, unsure of where they really are, while Maddie laughs with joy. The princesses tumble out of the slide and land at Kitty's feet. See, they're fine, purrs Kitty. These are supposed to be a secret, Maddie yells. No one can know. I don't think they'll tell, Kitty said with a wink. It can't be, Briar said in shock. A rabbit hole, answers Holly. Shh, yelled Maddie. It's a secret. As long as it can get us to Ashlynn, I don't care what it is, said Briar. Good, 'cause we're here, replied Kitty. What? Holly said, confused. Once again, all three girls were knocked off their feet, and before they knew it, they tumbled out of the trunk of a large tree next to Fee Lagoon. Unaware of their presence, Ashlynn was talking to Pesky along with the other woodland creatures. I know, agreed Ashlynn, talking to a fawn. You can understand them? Holly said in shock, walking towards Ashlynn. Holly, Briar, she yells in surprise. Briar, still picking herself up from the ground, hadn't heard Ashlynn's conversation with the animals. Ashlynn, I've been so worried, she yells, running over. I don't care who you date, and anyone who has something to say about it can talk to me. We love you, and you mean so much to us, Holly adds. Ashlynn said nothing, staring at her friends before hugging them tightly while Maddie bounced with excitement next to Kitty, who seemed completely bored. I'm sorry I disappeared. I just couldn't bring myself to face anyone, Ashlynn said, teary-eyed. It's okay. Once I stopped and listened to what Maddie was saying, it made sense. Kind of, laughs Briar. Briar, along with Maddie, fills in Ashlynn about everything she missed while Holly sits quietly in her thoughts. I picked out a dress for you, adds Briar. I'm not sure I want to celebrate love right now, Ashlynn said sheepishly. Ashlynn, do you love Hunter? Briar asks. The princess turns red before answering. Yes, she says proudly. Then go get him, laughs Briar. The girls all laugh before embracing once again and head back to Ever After. On their way back, Holly grabs Ashlynn's arm to slow her down, and once there was a bit of distance between them and the rest of the group, Holly swallows nervously before speaking. Ashlynn, do you have magic? What? No, magic is forbidden, answers Ashlynn, who also sounded nervous. I heard you. You could understand those animals, said Holly. Ashlynn, with all the lies again stuck in her throat, said nothing. They walked in silence for a bit before Holly got the courage to say something. I have magic too, she says, as her voice trembles, looking at the ground. At the glass palace, rebels and royals alike dance and celebrate in their very best attire. The palace was decorated with all shades of pink, black, and white, along with hearts and roses. It was the perfect mix of elegant royal with punk rebel. The sun had gone down, and one by one each student snuck off campus to the party. By the time Raven had arrived, the party was already in full swing. And without Maddie, she felt out of place, especially since she'd never been to a party before. Raven, over here, Cupid yells. Hey, it looks great, Raven said, walking over to her. True Heart's Day, Maddie screams before jumping on Raven's back. Where did you come from? Raven laughs. A hat, Maddie answers simply. Who's DJing tonight? She asks Cupid. We got the daughter of the Pied Piper, yells Cupid. Melody Piper, Maddie screams with excitement. "What's up, Ever After?" Melody says into a microphone on stage. "Let's get it started." The music kicks up, and Maddie drags Raven to the dance floor. A few songs later, Holly, Briar, and Ashlynn walked in dressed in their fairy best. The entire party stared in awe as the princesses walked in, including Hunter, who quickly looked away. Before Ashlynn could make her way over to him, Cupid tapped on the microphone. "Since True Hearts Day hasn't been celebrated in such a long time, I want to tell everyone what it's all about. Once upon a time, my father blessed a special tree that no matter how rough the winter, or if the other trees failed to bloom, this tree bloomed once every year, and on that day its fruit was as sweet as they could be. People from every kingdom would come and give its fruit to the one they loved most, promising they would do it every year, showing that it's not always easy, but true love will always find a way." And so, to encourage all of us to follow our true heart's desire, Cupid whistled and Prince Elijah enters, carrying a basket of True Hearts Day fruit. Make sure to give yours to someone special. The crowd cheers and Cupid points to Melody to start the music again. "Could I say something, Melody?" Ashlynn asks, stepping up to the stage. "Sure," Melody replies, handing her a microphone. "Hunter," she starts to say, "when I listen to my true heart's desires, it tells me that you're my Prince Charming." The crowd awes at Ashlynn's speech, and she makes her way over to Hunter in the middle of the room. "I'd like to give this to you," she says sheepishly, handing Hunter the fruit. "If you'll have it," she adds. Hunter's face instantly lights up. "Of course," he says, picking her up and spinning around. Melody turns the music back on, and the crowd cheers before continuing with the party, while Apple makes her way over to the couple. "Apple, I'm so sorry. It's just," Ashlynn starts to say, but is interrupted by Apple, who hands her a fruit. "Why are you giving this to me?" Ashlynn asks. "I might be worried about you, and we might not see eye to eye on some things, but I still care about you. That's what's in my true heart," Apple says, holding Ashlynn's hand. Once again, tears start to form in Ashlynn's eyes, and the two friends share a tight embrace. "Thanks, Apple. You're the best," whispers Ashlynn. "I know," laughs Apple. "This is the best day of my life," Hunter says, joining in on the hug. The party continues for hours, with everyone, including Duchess, despite her plan failing, having an enchanting time. Hunter and Ashlynn eventually slip away to the gardens outside, where they share a romantic kiss in the moonlight, with Ashlynn feeling completely free and at peace for the first time. Maybe, she thought to herself, as they laid on the cool grass staring up at the clouds. While the students of Ever After High went through their trials of their first week of school, deep within the catacombs beneath, Giles Grimm, the headmaster's brother, rushed back and forth between the corridors, rambling to himself while flipping through papers. "The fates that bind the chains have cracked," he warns to no one, it seems. "Two more it needs," he continues. "Destinies may trick the pen." Giles stops pacing and looks up at the rocky ceiling of the catacombs before whispering, "We forged the chains that crack, and now our shadows have seeped into our seeds." That night, the sky over Ever After was completely still, even more still than it had been on the night of the first Grand Royal Council meeting years ago, once again almost as if it were preparing for a storm.